Well, good morning everybody. My name is Dr. JD Swanson. I'm the author of Karate Science. And today is part 2 of a two-parter talking about the idea of using axes in terms of movement. And if you recall last time, we sort of finished the story with talking about being able to rotate through sort of the side, the center, and the other side, right? So as we make sort of movement, it was this idea of being able to rotate through the back hip, which would push me forward, rotating through the front hip, which would push me backwards, and through the center, that would keep me in place. So what we're going to do is we're going to expand on that. We talked about that in a basic format. What I want to do today is talk about that and put it into a Jiyu, into a free format. So without further ado, let's get started. Hey. Us. Good. Okay, so let's warm up a little bit. We're going to warm up with just both exercises that we sort of finished out yesterday with, just very quickly. So from here, just make Zen Kutsurachi. Practicing Gedanbarai again. You want to practice Gedan, Age, Soto, Uchi, right, as you move. So just from here, just loading. And what I want you to be cognizant of is which axis you use. So as you rotate your hip, are you rotating, keeping this one still and shifting forward? Are you rotating off this one and shifting back? Are you rotating through the center, right? Which one you're rotating through? I want you to be cognizant of that. That's number one. Number two, as you make the rotation, I want you to be cognizant or really aware of which leg's doing the pushing, which leg's doing the connecting. So when I roll, for example, forward, I've got to remember it's this leg here that's pushing into my target. At the same time, remember the idea of rotating the wrist at the very end, whether it's agyuke, sotuke, uchuke, right, gedanbarai, whichever you do, shutuke. And then the last piece is making sure you've got that connection. So you've got that sort of three-way push, push, push. If you're moving backwards, if you're rotating back, remember the connection now is in the back, this opening of the hip. If it's both, really just, if the center, just the rear leg is really the one that does the push there. So just be aware of which leg is pushing up from the floor to move your hip and drive the hip, the wrist rotating, the breath, all of those kinds of things. So the technique just from here, being cognizant, pushing, 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 whichever way you want to go. Pushing, pushing, right, whichever way. Sotuke, pushing, 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 whichever axis you want. So try that both legs, give it a go, just use it to warm up. Press pause, rip into it. Excellent, okay. From here, of course, the next one, just using it to warm up again, doing the stepping version, so this will be stepping forward. Again, rotating off the back hip, stepping forward again, being cognizant of not rotating through the center, but really push forward. Have that feeling of driving forward into your target. That requires the rotation through this back hip. So from here, practicing driving forward, practice driving back, which is of course the front hip rotating and pulling you back. And of course center, dropping, not a jump, just let the feet go. Okay? Practice left side, right side. Gedanbarai, agyuke, sotuke, uchuke, shutuke. Or, yeah, shuto if you want. See how you go, and then we'll come back and carry on. Good, okay, so now you're up to speed. What we're going to do now is we're going to move now from a Jiyu kind of position. So the big difference in my mind between Jiyu and starting from Shizentai, for example, is that Shizentai is our natural position. It's starting up here. It's kind of like starting at zero, if you like. When I imagine starting from a Jiyu position, right, I'm not all stretched out. It's about one stance, about 1 foot length shorter, and I take that slack up in the rear leg, right, bum tucked in, hands sort of here. What I imagine is that's like a halfway point. So if I think from our most outstretched position, the classic Kazamazuki, right, I'm all the way here. As I squeeze through, if I'm pulling back or forward, as I pull through, I end up with sort of all combinations and permutations of this. Because Jiyu Kumite, or Jiyu Kamae, in my mind, is sort of like that halfway position. I've started to make the transition. I've started to make the transition. From here, it's just here. Both fists have started moving. Right, here's Shizentai in the middle. Right, Jiyu or Kamae and Kazami. So what I sort of imagine is it's sort of like this sort of stretch to stretch to stretch. So what that means is rather than when I'm here and I go through the full expansion or I'm doing a full step forward, what I imagine for Jiyu is that I've got less time. I'm like a neutral of a car, but I'm kind of already biased towards one side. This hand is already halfway out for the punch. This hand is already halfway out for the punch and ready to go. My hips are already, because they're neither full hami, full shoman, they're sort of halfway. They're in neutral. My legs, I've got equal bend in both legs, so I can push forward, push back, push to the side as I need to go. It's like that classic neutral position. Now what that means is that I don't want to necessarily have these big arcing movements. Because if I imagine my hands, my kamae, it's not here, it's here. It's pointing out towards distance, out towards you. If I shoot two laser beams, they'll eventually meet at my target, wherever my target is, right? It might be 3 feet away from me, it might be 6 feet away, it might be 1 foot away, in which case I become tighter, right? It's always pointing in a straight line towards my target. So with that in mind, if I'm going to be attacked, I don't want to do a complete open and close. There's no reason for this full and complete motion unless I need it. So one of the cool things about karate in general is that when I do any technique in the Kihon form, in a basic form, and this is just genius, it's what I call degenerate. So it's a DNA term, I know, I'm a scientist. So when I think about degenerate, it means multiple things can come about from the same motion. So if we take an easy example of Gerambarai, right? What we have, if we imagine the full load and push, what I'm doing here is you can imagine I'm slapping someone across the face. That's the first part of the block. All I do is extend and pull, right? So you can just pull back, but if I just let this elbow go loose, I can slap, bang, right? I've also got empi. I've also got nagashiyuke. I've also got a punch. All of these are techniques that come from the same motion, the same elbow position. The second thing, if I look at my other arm, it can either be a gyaku gerambarai, it can be a straight punch, and so forth. When I make the gerambarai itself, when I make the next piece, it can be empi, right, straight down, it can be a strike, almost a raken, or it can be the rotation all the way down. So what I've got is I've got a bunch of different techniques that I can use depending on the context of where I am, how I'm moving my body relative to my opponent. And so in Kihon, it does a wonderful, wonderful job of practicing all of these motions every time I make the block, which is why you must practice complete and full techniques in Kihon. In Jiyu, I don't need to do that. I'm already here, I'm already in this position, my elbow's already in position. So if I'm going to make Gerambarai, all I need to do is I need to practice the end of the technique. This is already covering the center. The natural action of my elbow without moving it will naturally cover my body, right? From here, a technique coming in, lower sweep, it naturally covers my body and makes the block. All I need to do is as I hit the touch, I do my rotation of my wrist, skinny to fat, boom. And at the same time, understand what I learned about my hips, understanding that full body feeling that we were working on last time, where I have the push off the leg, the rotation of the hips into that final strong position, and I'm good, right? So this is something what we call short course. Likewise with Sotuke, if I'm here, all I really need to do, because this is on my center line, is rotate my hip, rotate my wrist, leave this where it is, and this is the block. It does not have to do all of this. It does if this has a use. It does if this has a use. But in a straight punch coming in, here it comes, and then move, right? This is important. The only reason I can do that is because I understand the basic technique. So what I want you to do is from here, just practice. Don't worry about axes just yet. Just worry about the motion. Think about the rotation of the wrist. Simply rotate it. Don't move your elbow in funny ways. That's not natural. Just drop it like a hammer. From here, just drop. Pull your rear hand back for now, and I'll show you a more advanced way in a second, and allow your body to just make the connection, Go into your final, take a picture, then click. Take a picture. Here, take a picture. Take a picture. Practice Agyuke. Take a picture. Take a picture. Sotuke. Take a picture. Uchuke. Take a picture. Take a picture. So it's about wrist rotation, hip, leg, pushing, squeezing at the same time. Practice that on the spot, both sides from kamae. And then we'll now include the actual little bit of foot movement that needs to come into that to give us our different axes. Give it a go. Very good. So what you've got now is you've got this idea of being able to coordinate from a very, very relaxed position. One, okay, get them right, this kind of feeling. As you progress, one of the things that you don't need to do, you must understand the feeling of the hikite hand. But as you progress, this does not need to be involved. It's an important pedagogical tool, right? It teaches you to pull. We're much better at pulling things towards us than pushing things away. So it allows us to be able to make that connection when we're learning, right? And when I say learning, right up into black belt level. What you can do is eventually, if you understand that feeling and can transfer the power just through the parts of the body that need it, you don't need to move this hand. So there's multiple reasons why you might want to do that. Number one, if I make the block and if I pull from here, it gives me a classic 1, 2 type of count. If I don't move this hand, I now have here, notice this is already in position. So what I can do is I can simply, I end up with a 1.5 count. This is exactly analogous from something you've always done. Kokuchituke, why is the hand not here? Why is it here? Because from here, my hip's already round. This is already on the path to drive. You don't need to pull back and drive. It's already there. Hip and body moves. It's the same concept. Here I make my block, sotuke. Now this is here, pointing my toe. Oh, it's ready to go. Okay? It's just less wasted space. So by practicing Kihon, this leads us into Jiyu. So what I'd like you to try, if you want, is try doing the same exercise, but don't retract this hand. Give it a go, see how it feels. If it feels weak, don't practice it. Or if your blocks get mushy, or your strikes get mushy, do not do it that way. You need more practice this. Then you can use this. Does that make sense? Be very careful with this because I know it goes away from what we're told quite often within our karate training. But after a while, as long as you understand how your body connects together, this can be separate. Give it a go. Excellent. Okay, so from here, the next piece is I want you to now shift. So now be cognizant of which hip you're driving forward. For example, if I'm making gerambarai and I want to drive in on my opponent, boom, as I'm using it as a step. So I'm going through clearing the way and stepping in. I can imagine driving off my rear hip as I push forward from my neutral kamae position to zenkutsu. Whichever way I want to do that. So now feel off the front, off the rear hip, push, push, push. Here, feel push, push. Here, push, push. And again, you can practice it with whichever block you want. Here, push, push, push. This kind of feeling. Agyuke, sotuke, uchuke. Likewise, backwards, I can feel push off the front leg, push, push. So it's here, open, and drive. Open, and drive. You can start to play with that. Or, of course, center, drive, drive. Try and play with that now, whether you're rotating off the back hip, which pushes you forward, back, right, or center, whichever makes. And each one has a particular role that it plays. We'll talk about that in a second. Give it a go, both sides. Try Geidan, Age, Soto, Uchi. Very good. So why would you want to do this? It comes about with the dynamics in a real fluid situation. If I have somebody that I want to break distance and come in close, they're attacking me, and I want that real sort of sen no sen feeling, this is what I can use. Attacker comes in, and I simply drive in and attack their block. Boom, and hit. That kind of feeling. And what it does, especially if I'm using something that opens them up, clears the way and goes in, or closes them down this way, you can imagine the reaction as I come in ends up being this very sort of this kind of action. So by driving in and attacking my opponent, I can make that sort of feeling. The other reason you might want to do it is depending on which angle you want to use. So I might drive in straight, or I could drive in on an angle, right? We've talked about those before. If I rotate and move backwards, I can imagine that with a very go no sen feeling. So that's the idea here. In comes the attack. I ride them out and pull them towards me. This feeling, this absorption feeling, with the idea of driving in. Again, in a basic case, I can just pull back the length of the stance. In an extreme case, all the way to kokuts and driving in. Again, this is being cognizant of which axis I'm simply pushing off. And then the third way is just if I want to just stay where I am, almost stonewalling, and just absorb and then drive, right? Where what that'll do in this particular case, pulling back, expanding through the front hip will stretch them out, pushing in off the front hip shuts them down. This one just keeps it neutral, keeps it where it is and goes in. So it gives you that feeling. So this is why you would want to do that. So now, give that a go, give the same drill a try with those particular images in mind. And then I have one more thing for you, and then we'll finish up for today. Excellent. So what we've done so far is we've really talked about this sort of toe-to-toe linear forward and backward movement. How does this now relate, this whole concept relate to being able to shift or rotate? And the answer is quite simple. There's another axis that I haven't talked about. So if we think here, we've got the idea of the front hip, we've got the idea of the center, and we've got the idea of the back hip. The other one we haven't talked about is out here on the front hand, at the point of wrist rotation. So this is another piece that's rotating. And if you imagine your whole body is connected together, and in this particular case, instead of the axis being here, the axis is out here. As I rotate my wrist, that turns my whole body, and I'm going to kind of make it look silly, but it's here, this feeling, this feeling. Likewise, I can also make that rear foot being the axis of rotation. All I'm doing in reality, when you think about this, is my front hand, front leg is simply rotating with my hip, with my body. So all I'm doing, as far as my body's concerned, is it's making this action, right? Again, I'm rotating and it's making going to the hami position that we're all used to, right? Because I must always make this position for the block. This is the strongest position. As I make that, instead of rotating through my hip, I'm using that rotation now to here. I'm using that rotation to here. So it's still that nice connect, but it's now, instead of being here, it's now out here to make that position. So what you want to practice now, and we'll just practice it with Sotuke initially, is imagine same feeling. Rotation of wrist, rotation of hip, connection of back leg. Feel it the same, but now simply rotate through this axis. Rotate it through this axis. Rotate it through this axis. Rotate it through this axis. So what you're doing effectively is it's kind of like I've got my hand here, this is the center line of my body, this is the line that they're going to attack, and I'm simply using skinny to fat part of my wrist to turn and rotate. From here, right, if I'm using my rear hand to make the block, I'm simply using this to turn and rotate. And I'm simply here. This kind of feeling. So what I've done is I've effectively changed. And if you notice, nothing changed. I'm not stretching out. I'm just remaining here. In comes the attack. And it comes, I rotate skinny to fat, take that rotation. I'm here, I simply rotate. I'm going to make uchuke this time. I simply rotate. I simply rotate. I simply, if I shift, rotate. I simply, if I shift, right, it's going to be this hand doing the block. I simply leave, rotate. So what you imagine, it's kind of like my elbow remains where it is in space and my body shifts around it. So what I'd like you to try is we'll try and make some semblance. Try it just with Sotoge. We'll do basic ones. Here, think rotate, think connect off the back leg, and simply 1, 2, 3. And again, coordinating, rotation, squeeze. This feeling. Next one, from here you can try it with Degenerate. Simply leave this still in space, leave my elbow still, rotate off the body. Right? This may or may not work. This kind of feeling. Okay? It's that very, very subtle, minimal movement of just, in this case, that might work better. This simply sliding down the pole. Simply sliding down the pole. So again, try it, just moving it nice and easy. Shifting, 1, agyuke, sutta uchuke, rear hand. Right, again, whichever technique you make, whether you're going to Gyaku Hamae, whether you go into Zenkuts, whatever you go, doesn't matter. Have a go with that concept and be cognizant of this time rotating through this axis that's sort of out in kind of a triangle. And so with that, give it a go. Excellent. Okay, so what you've got here now is you've got this idea that we can now rotate through 1, 2, 3, but also when our hands are in front of us, 4, 5 different axes as we move. My hands remain still in space, track onto that opponent. Right? So once again, 1 axis, 2nd axis, 3rd axis, 4th axis, 5th axis, depending on where we are. And then of course we have some in the rear, which we're not going to talk about so much today. Just think about those front ones and off the hands. Because for those, there's of course a linear action that will happen. So with that, I hope you all have a wonderful day, and I'll talk to you again soon. Hey, us. Thank you.